Today we're going to look at another frequently asked question, and that question is, how do I take notes? We're going to look at 7 different methods, the last 2 of which are the ones that I recommend, and those 2 methods are outlining and Cornell notes. Choose the method that is the most effective for you. There are several examples of note-taking, and I'm going to go through a couple examples of those before I focus on my 2 favorites. And I want to start with the most obvious, which is probably your choice of technology. Many of you may be taking notes on your phone, on your laptop, on your tablet, whatever it is that you have. And I want to emphasize for you that many of the methods that I'm going to be showing you on note paper today, you can use your preferred method of technology to create your own graphic organizer. Now, I have used what I call interactive notebooks with students for many years. Basically, what an interactive notebook is a reference tool within which you create a table of contents and you keep notes on all types of different information pieces that your teachers have given you. Some of these things I have bought on Teachers Pay Teachers, and so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail with this because of copyright. But what I like to do is have students keep vocabulary in the back of the book turned upside down, and then take other notes for their class through the notebook as you're going. Now, one thing I am going to make a nod to is you can go on the internet and find all kinds of sources, and you can find examples of many of the graphic organizers that I'm talking to you about today, and maybe you can find some templates and some things like that if that's more your style. Now, to look at our actual examples today of your graphic organizers, one example, and again this is a graphic organizer method of note taking, one example is a T-chart or side by side. You basically draw a T on your paper, and then you can keep comparative notes about one topic on one side, a second topic on the other. You can write vocabulary words on this side with definitions on this one. You could actually also make 3-column or even 4-column notes across your paper if you like this form of graphic organizer for note taking. Another method of note taking, and actually here we have, I'm just kind of calling this one shape systems. We have 2 examples of shape systems. The first one is a Venn diagram. You may have seen this in a lot of your classes in the past, where you draw 2 circles on your paper. You have topic 1, topic 2, and then the overlapping area focuses on the similarities between the 2 topics. So basically this is a compare and contrast type of note taking, where here you have the differences and here you have the similarities. Another shape system is where you write the main idea and the information about that main idea in a box at the top of your paper, and then you draw lines down to additional boxes, and in these boxes you include details and evidence underneath that main idea. You can also use this one as a form of outlining when you're getting ready to write an essay. What is your main topic? What is your point 1, point 2, point 3? And then you can go back and you can add in evidence. So you can not only use this one for note taking, but you can also use this one for essay writing. Another method of note taking, and now we're getting into the ones that you're probably going to most commonly see in your courses. This is some of the ones that I see most often with my students, and this is just the sentence method. Basically, you write down your topic. This example today has us looking at the topic of the American dream. Is it the same for today's generations? And I've written down a couple of preliminary questions that I'm anticipating my professor talking about. What was considered the dream for early settlers? Was this dream a reality for all people? And I like to use the bullet points to kind of set off each topic that I'm talking about. But essentially all you do is write down, as you're listening to your lecture, as you're watching the video, write down a sentence about each piece of relevant information as it is presented to you. Again, this is probably one that you have already been using in your school experience. The next method that I want to talk to you about today is outlining. Now we're getting into the first of the two methods that I'm going to be talking about today that I strongly recommend that you consider using. Basically, an outline is where you're just following along with your instructor, with your video, and you're making note of, again, your topic, your first point, information about that point, your second point, information about that point, your third point, information about that point, etc., etc. Now, please note on point number 3, I did also show you how you can continue scaffolding this information. Point 3, info point A underneath that, and then I have supplemental information about this first detail. I have clarification information, I have vocabulary, etc., etc., etc. And so what I did here is I labeled my main points 1, 2, and 3. You could also use Roman numerals for this if you choose to do so, but if you want to keep it simple, just point 1, point 2, point 3. Any subpoints under that, you begin with the letters A, B, and C. If you indent again with another level of information, go back to your numbers 1, 2, and 3. And just to show you exactly what I'm talking about here, again, let's say we have a point 4. So I'm going to write down my information about point 4. I'm going to write down the first detail or bit of information about point 4. Well, now my instructor is giving me more clarification. So I'm just going to write down detail number 1. Oh, here's another point of information, detail number 2 about this piece. Here's a third one. Oh, now they're even going into another level. So again, you just continue going back and forth between your A's, B's, and C's, and your 1, 2s, and 3s as you're going through your information. Now, let's say the instructor is finished with this point, and now they're introducing another piece of information. I'm simply going to come out, start back with the letter B, and again, scaffold as I need to do so. Okay, so and again, this is the outline method. Now, I showed this to you really quickly. I want to spend a little bit of time on this one. And so I'm going to go back and show you a detailed outline that I have started on a lecture on synthesizing facts, interpretation, and media formats. And in this particular lecture, my professor has told me that the first target is to locate and select appropriate sources to answer a research question. So that's my main topic, and that's going to get the outline number 1. Now, under this section, my professor has started listing things that I need to consider when I am selecting or locating information, getting ready to conduct maybe a research paper, a research essay, some kind of project that they have assigned me. Now here, A, the first point under my main point, the subpoint, is accuracy, true and verifiable information. So I have written this down with the letter A with a little bit of clarifying information so that when I'm going back over my notes later, I get an idea of what it was the professor was talking about. The next subpoint, B, is credibility. So I wrote down the word credible. And what does it mean to be credible? Basically, is this a trustworthy source? C, the third subpoint, is talking about bias. Look for sources that are non-biased. This means that they present facts without supporting an opinion. You don't want to go looking for editorials or op-eds, as I call them in class. You're looking for things that are basically focused on the facts as far as non-bias goes. Now, we got a little switch up. The professor has mentioned an acronym, RIBS, RIBS. An acronym is a way to help remember how I vet a source for bias. And underneath RIBS, the first thing that I'm going to be looking at, and notice here, point 1 was a 1, subpoints A, B, and C. Well, now I'm going to go back to my numbers again. So underneath RIBS, the first R stands for reputation. Is this a well-known source? Subpoint 2, intended audience. Is the audience of this nonfiction piece clearly identified? 3, again, bias. Does this article present opinion or personal references? 4, subject. Is this relevant to my topic? If it's not relevant to your topic, you don't even want to waste your time on it. So again, RIBS, reputation, intended audience, bias, and subject, and you will be seeing this again in a later video. But this is, again, just an example of how to take notes on this topic if you're in the lecture. So I've written down all this information. Now my professor is going on to a fourth subpoint of locating and selecting appropriate sources: accuracy, credibility, bias, ABC. Now I'm going back out to the fourth one. D, is it free of faulty reasoning? And under this category, my professor has told me to look for examples of ethos, pathos, and logos, and to look for logical fallacies as I'm reading. Now, the second point that my professor is talking about, again, this is synthesizing facts, interpretations, how do I find reliable sources, but also how do I put my information into a presentation for my class or for my professor, for my peers. So the second point of this lecture is talking about presenting your results. Subpoint A for presenting. Method of delivery. What kinds of methods of delivery can I choose to present my final results? I could use slides, music, skit, a visual essay, a PSA, which stands for public service announcement, a board game, an essay, and this list actually goes on and on. I simply am listing 7 of them here today, just again as an example. So method of delivery is important, but also B, subpoint 2, underneath topic 2, or subpoint B, we want to talk about oration concerns. And for this, let's assume that my professor is going to be mentioning eye contact and possibly giving me some tips on how to maintain eye contact, or possibly how to look like I'm giving eye contact. Another important point is going to be, let's say, loudness of voice. You want to talk loud enough for the people in the back of the room to hear you, but you don't want to shout. Another thing to consider is your rate. You don't want to speak too quickly, because if you speak too quickly, people will lose where you are, especially if your class or your peers are taking notes. Some other things to consider in here is your physical appearance. When you are giving a presentation in front of class, you want to look neat and presentable. You want to be, your clothes need to be neat, your hair combed, those kinds of things. And again, these would simply be things that you need to be aware of and you need to consider before your presentation. Another point is time. Has your professor given you a time requirement? If your professor has not given you a time requirement, something else to consider here would simply be, how much time do you actually need to effectively present your information? But again, getting back to the point of what we're doing, I am showing you a way of outlining notes as you are attending a lecture, as you are watching a video. You can use this if you are working in groups to do a jigsaw, any kind of activity where there is someone speaking and you are needing to write down the information. Outline method is a very intuitive method to use. I think most students may go to either, as I had said earlier, either the outline method or the sentence method. Myself, if I am in a course or a class, I either use the sentence method or the outline method. And so I definitely wanted to spend a little bit of time on this one today. Now, before I leave the outline method, I just want to go over again one more time the steps for doing this. Write your topic at the top of your page. Use the number 1 or a Roman numeral 1 to start your first point. So this is going to be point 1. Any sub-points under this are going to get a letter of the alphabet starting with A. A, B, C, D. If you take it into another level of organization, you're again going to go back to your numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. If you were to have to go in another level, what are you going to start with this time? Yes, you got it right. You're going to start with your letters again. A, B, C, D, etc. Okay? So again, your next point would be point 2. If you go in a level, go with your alphabet. A, B. If you go in another level, you're going to go with your numbers. If you go in an additional level, what are you going to start with? That's right. You're going to go with A, B, C. Okay, trick question. How about if you have to go in again? Yes, you're going to go back to your numbers again. So number, letter, number, etc. Okay, and again, maybe that's a little bit redundant, but the whole point of this is to make sure that you clearly understand some things that you can do in your class to help you comprehend your information, to do better on your exams, and hopefully to get that grade that you need. Okay, on to the second form of note-taking that I really want to spend some time on today, and this one is called Cornell Notes. And some people call this like the I form. What you can do is simply draw a line across the top of your paper, come up about 6 or 7 lines from the bottom and draw another horizontal line across the bottom of your paper. And then instead of drawing a vertical line down the middle, you're actually going to offset that line a little bit to the left. So you have an offset I, and then you're going to draw a line down between the two previous ones. As with many of our other forms of note-taking, you can personalize this one. Some of the information that I recommend you begin with at the top of your paper is, first of all, write down your topic. What is it that you are talking about today? And I'm just going to stick with the American Dream topic, since that's one that we used earlier. I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. So what is your topic? If you are using a textbook, you might even want to write down the chapter number, the section number, any other kind of relevant information. If you have a presenter that is different from your normal instructor, you might want to write down the presenter's name. You might want to write down the date, the class period or class block. But again, personalize this information to what it is that you feel is relevant. And in this bottom section, that you call this your summary. When we were looking at the SQ4R, if you want to go back and look at that, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, go back and watch my other video on that. One of the things that we had mentioned was writing a 3 to 5 sentence summary of a text. So this is where you're going to summarize the information that was presented in this lecture. Now, just like with the T-charts, you essentially have a T-chart here. You have 2 column notes. On the left-hand side, you are going to write down your questions, main ideas, vocabulary, and anything else that you feel like you need to write down in this column. So this is going to be where you're going to write these things: questions, main ideas, and vocabulary. What you're going to write down on the right-hand side is going to be your notes regarding those questions. You're going to be writing answers to those questions, definitions, examples. And here you might incorporate some of those other graphic organizers. You may simply write sentences, or you could possibly do an outline. Or if you're more visual, you can draw visuals or pictures. But again, if we're going back over just our basic structure here, your topic, your chapter number, your presenter, your date, your block, any other overall information at the top of your document that you feel that you're going to need to know. At the bottom of your eye chart, you are going to include a section for your summary. So after the information has been presented, write 2 or 3 sentences, maybe up to 5 sentences, just summarizing what your teacher talked about that day. On the left-hand side, you're going to write your questions, your main ideas, your vocabulary. On the right-hand side, you're going to write your notes, your answers, your definitions, examples, sentences, outlines, visuals, pictures, etc., etc., etc. So for example, if one of the key terms that we talked about in our lecture today was bias, kind of mixing up a couple of the things from earlier, but bias, how do you determine if a piece has bias? Well, the first thing that we had was an acronym called RIBS, R-I-B-S. And then we are going we're going to go back after we've written our acronym down and fill in what that stands for. So the R stands for reputation. The I stands for intended audience. And etc., etc. Okay? So let's say you've got your notes over here, and then you have a question. Perhaps you have a question about what a certain word is. Maybe the teacher mentioned in this lecture. And if you mess up, you just do like I'm doing here, kind of write over it so you can see it. Ethos, pathos, logos. And we're going to put a question mark beside that because those are some vocabulary words that maybe you don't know what they mean. And if you don't know what they mean, you need to come back over later and you need to look up the definitions of what those things are. What is ethos? What is pathos? What is logos? And you'll hear those pronounced different ways as well. Okay? But then later I can go back and I can look up the definitions and I can include these on my notes. So again, academic vocabulary, jargon, words that are specific to your topic, you can include those in here. You can write sentences, you can take quick notes. A sentence method was one that we talked about. Again, make sure that you're writing in full sentences or at least enough information so that you know what you're talking about when you go back over these notes. So if I write here happy, okay, what does that mean? Am I happy that I'm in this lecture today? Am I happy the class is over? But really, what does this mean? If I write down happy, that doesn't mean anything. So give yourself enough details so that when you're looking back at this, a few hours later, possibly a couple of days later, so that you know what it is that you were taking notes about. Now with Cornell Notes, when you're first starting out, you might want to go ahead and draw your eye chart as I showed you here. But another thing that you might want to consider is simply starting off with drawing your line across the top of your paper, drawing your vertical line down the side of your paper all the way down to the bottom, and just leaving it like this, because you may fill in an entire page of notes. And what this allows you to do is simply continue your note taking on the back. Maybe you filled up the entire back of your page, and then you can put your summary at the bottom of your paper on the back. And so again, let me show you what I did. There's this method, all on the front of your paper, or you can start your information on the front of your page and simply carry it over to the back. One last mention again, use the method that works the best for you. If you do not like Cornell Notes, I do recommend that you do try that outlining method. If outlining is not your style, go try one of the other methods, perhaps the sentence method. I think these three, sentence, outlining, and Cornell Notes, are probably the most three commonly used, at least in my personal experience as an instructor. Use some kind of shape system or other graphic organizer system, or you could use a T-chart, 2-column notes, 3-column notes. Go online and find what other kinds of methods work for you, and get ready to take those notes and hopefully make a better grade because you're understanding what it is that you're reading. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you later.